We move swiftly on, of course, from the fastest car out of this particular update in Gran Turismo 7 down to the slowest vehicle, at least in standard form, a kind of returning face but also not at the same time. And of course in GT7 we've seen this happen a couple of times. There have been cars which are very, very close to ones which we used to have before, but the year might be a bit different or the trim level may be a little bit off, so it's technically not a car that has returned. But it's pretty close, because of course in the past, in non-premium form, we had the Volvo 240 GLT. If I recall correctly, I think that car had 123 horsepower, I want to say, so a bit more than this one. This one's 109, which still isn't too bad for an average classic car, and obviously a non-performance machine. It's primarily about being a practical car first and foremost, which is one of the reasons why something this big and this practical, being so lightweight in particular, really is a surprise, at least if you're not familiar with how classic cars are typically a lot lighter than they look anyway. They look big and boxy and heavy, but there's actually a lot of empty space inside most classics. So in the case of this one, like I said, it is the slowest car out of the update, and you're looking at, like I said, 109 horsepower, 1324 kilos, which is really good. Like I said in my thoughts of the update as a whole, that's actually lighter than the R31 Skyline, which is kind of crazy. And the really surprising thing to me about this car is even when you fully strip out the weight, the distribution is still 50-50. It looks like the kind of machine that would have no weight over the back end because it's, like I said, just all empty space. And then of course you've got that engine at the front. But that's not the case. It is a 50-50 car, which makes the fact that it is so tail happy when you fully upgrade it that much more weird. Because to say that this thing does not feel like a 50-50 car is a vast understatement. This thing feels more like probably a 70-30 in favour of the front end, to be honest, in terms of how it kicks that back end out. And it does it on sports tyres. Of course on racing tyres it's an improvement, but even then, this thing really does like to slide around. You can make it handle and look and even have the poise of a classic touring car, which of course Volvo did do some touring car racing with a later estate, not this one though. And in terms of versatility, this is a great car much like it is in real life, because you can use it convincingly for a number of different things. You could use it as like a tuner level machine with like some stance and a few upgrades, a semi-realistic kind of build, or you could go full on drift car. You could turn it into a rally build, like a classic rally wagon, or you could even turn it into, as I said, like a classic style touring car. It's in fact very much a JDM kind of vibe in that sense, where those cars tend to be very versatile. And it's not too surprising why Volvos would be so popular far outside of just Sweden. Here in the UK we have a very strong Volvo presence. You don't see too many classics anymore compared to the more modern stuff, which obviously is a world apart from what Volvo used to be. It's still cool and many of them are very impressive, but these classic ones are legendary cars. Of all the cars my old man had, his favourite was his Volvo. He had a 244DL and he absolutely loved that thing. This one in terms of top-end tuning at the moment, because of course there is no engine swap at the time of doing this review, I suspect that next month or maybe the month after, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we had a motor swap of some kind. Could be a 2JZ, could be a V8. Neither of those would really surprise me. A rotary engine would be quite cool as well. Imagine a 787B engine in this thing just down the road. That would be very cool. But even without that, you're looking at 350 horses and barely a ton, barely over 1,000 kilos. That's a pretty good combo. I mean, if you take away the fact that it's a classic wagon, if you told someone that you've got a 350 horsepower car that weighs just over 1,000 kilos, well, you could easily be fooled into thinking it was a TVR or a Noble or something like that. Because realistically, that's the kind of numbers that those machines really are working with. So when you recontextualize it that way, it's actually quite impressive. Now, in standard form, you're looking at less than 320 points, which really is not breaking the bank. And of course, the great thing about that is, because it's not heavy anyway, you can give it some performance upgrades, but still not break the bank on the point level. So if you do need a vehicle, and I know this isn't going to happen that often for most people, but if you need a car for the 350 point level, maybe in online lobbies, maybe 400, certainly 450 to 500, you can do so much more with a car like this, very much in the vein of a classic car in a general sense, certainly a muscle car. If you just focus on, like I say with muscle cars ironically, but in the form of this one in the exact opposite way, what I always say about muscle cars is focus on dropping the weight, stiffen up the springs, improve the gearing and the brakes, and the power takes care of itself. In the case of the Volvo 240 SE, it's the exact opposite. It's already light, it's decent enough through corners, the suspension and the brakes are fine. Of course you can tighten them up and it's not going to change the point level too much, but then if you give it more power, that's going to make the difference. Because at 1300 kilos, that's already a great weight to be working with, and then if you bump it up to like 200 horsepower, now you've got a bit of a weapon. Because again, if you compare that to something else, 1300 kilo car with 200 horses, that's in some cases like hot hatch territory. So this car, like I said, is so versatile, and it's so fun to see it back, quote unquote, in that slightly different form, being the SE, of course. And even in terms of pricing, of course, it is a used dealership vehicle. It's 40 grand, or just under 41. That could change, I guess, in future, but I don't necessarily expect it to. And as far as the visuals, if you watched my overarching thoughts for the update on Thursday, you'll have seen, of course, you've got like the spotlights, you can have deleted mud flaps, deleted wipers, a comical looking rear wing, which looks a lot better when you have a full livery on it. It's a great looking thing. And I have noticed some people who, I won't say that they don't get it, but it's that kind of vibe. You know, when you say to someone, oh, you just don't get it, you don't get why it's cool, it's often a movie thing where people just don't get a movie when they think it's artsy or whatever, but sometimes it kind of does apply. It's a you had to be there kind of thing, and if you just miss the boat on why these Volvos are so memed and so popular, it's definitely something worth looking into. And I don't say that to belittle people who don't know why Volvos are cool. You really should look into it, because they made some really cool cars back in the day. They still do, but back in the day more than you would think. And Forza has a prime example of that as well, the 242 Turbo, which is a really, really cool car that appears in a ton of different Forza games. This is the Gran Turismo equivalent of that. The wagons come up as consistently, pretty much, as the 242 does in the Forza titles. So this one, although nowhere near as powerful as that, that's like a 225 horsepower car. This one, though, having that lower end versatility is such a nice bonus, because many classics tend to be either very low on points but also really underpowered, and then others tend to have plenty of power but then they're much sloppier through corners and not really great to work with. So if you're not on the Volvo train yet, well, using this for some maybe lower level events, and perhaps tuning it for like 350 points to 450, maybe even 500, I think you might end up falling in love with it. It's certainly worth looking into as a drift car. I haven't tried it off-road yet, but I've no doubt it would be an absolute hoot to drive there as well, and I really am curious to see if we get any engine swaps. I think we probably will. It's way too much of a meme car not to do that, so we'll have to wait and see what that one is, or what those potentially are. Maybe we'll get more than one, you never know. But I'll see you next time with another review, which of course will be tomorrow, and drop your thoughts on the Volvo down below. Are you happy to see it kind of back in a slightly different form? If it's totally new to you, have you maybe fallen in love with it, or do you just absolutely hate it? So I'll see you next time, and for now, thanks for watching.